Okay. All right. Hey everyone, my name is Nate Jacobs, and I am starting a podcast called What Library? So I wanted to do an intro episode to explain my own biases and motivations for starting the podcast, and just to kind of give a little context for it and what kind of what's motivating me. The goal for me, big picture, is to not insert myself into this as much as possible because I'm sort of going through a learning phase right now where I've been for the past couple of years hitting my head up against a wall and not making a lot of progress. So the primary motivation here for me is to interview people who are much smarter than me and can help inform some of my kind of core assumptions and to either validate or reject some of those and to really set in stone some of the principles and foundations that I've been operating off of for the past few years, and obviously need to tweak some things and get some additional input so that I can then launch back into my scholarly communications efforts and activities with a bit more just insight from the community. And specifically, I've just been really wrestling with the concept of what a library is. What are the rules that define what a library is? What are our aspirations as a society for what a library should look like? So yeah, and I kind of had been going into this I had made some assumptions and come to some conclusions, just had been operating off of those, and I've kind of realized that some of those assumptions are a bit polarizing, or a bit, some people extremely have very strong similar beliefs, and some people have kind of assumed the opposite. So big picture, I'm kind of pausing and in this moment of reflection. And I also just love talking with people. And so the idea of just spending a year or two interviewing librarians and various people across the scholarly communication landscape to kind of do a real comprehensive, deep check-in on how people would answer the question, what is a library? That's just exciting for me in general, but also has this specific goal for me of helping inform my own assumptions and to really solidify some of those so that I can build on top of those principles and assumptions. Okay, so who am I? Where do I come from? What are my biases and all that stuff? Okay, so I was a neuroscientist for a very long time. So I got my PhD at UCI. I was studying sensory processing and somatosensory cortex, doing a lot of imaging, electrophysiology and imaging. I got all the way up to the point of being a postdoc in a large lab at UCLA, the type of lab where you're supposed to then just focus on publishing in Nature and Science and then going to get a faculty position. And I kind of knew it wasn't going to go well, and it went exactly how I was expecting it to. It's all around tough in general, but I also just really started getting sucked into the open science movement, and really was spending way more time thinking about why are we doing things the way that we're doing them in terms of publishing and making decisions, experimental decisions that were more focused on getting it published than the actual research. So yeah, I just slid into that slippery slope and just took a hard left turn and realized I wanted to build things in the scholarly communication space, in the meta research space. And the area where I really was pulled into and drawn towards was this moment of publication. So as a researcher, when you get to the point of being really excited about something and realizing, I want to go and share this with somebody, and really zeroing in on that was what really drew me into how can we better facilitate that moment and keep it in line with like the true spirit of science, like that excitement that you have when you have a result that's really exciting and really lights you up and you now want to go and share it. How do we have the technology, the platforms, the publishing process, all of the infrastructure of science? How do we capture that moment to advance science as efficiently and effectively and rapidly as possible while not getting in the way of that? And for me as a scientist, the things getting in the way of moments like that were just so monumental that I just almost felt like it didn't make sense to do the science anymore, while there were these barriers that were corrupting and twisting and really forcing researchers to behave in an anti-science way, not for their own fault, but because of the hoops that they needed to jump through to advance their career. So that's really what I've been focused on. As people who know me, not the most successfully, but for better or worse, that's just really, really what has captivated my mind. And specifically, what I've been really trying to explore is micropublications. So how we can change the format of the scientific article or create a new format, a micropublication format, where there is a much lower bar, not in terms of quality, but in terms of the narrative complexity that is required to publish something. So the way that I like to think about it is creating a venue for publishing individual results or about an individual figure without needing a whole paper, right? So you could publish a replication, you could publish a method, you could publish some small iterative step that has a high bar for scientific rigor and quality, but does not necessarily need to tell some amazing story. And in so doing, would enable narrative structures and storytelling at the community level, which, ideally would lead to a lot more reproducible results and reproducible narratives that are derived and built on top of many independent laboratories contributing to that narrative structure. So in terms of like how, like some of the biases that might bring in for me, and I should add that when I started that journey, I was trying to figure out what the best way to get to a platform was. A team of software engineers building a platform, and I had kind of come from the academic nonprofit grant seeking sort of space, and through hundreds of interactions and lots of conversations, and thinking about kind of exactly what I wanted to do, I sort of realized that the most effective way to get to my goals was actually to not pursue grants, but to actually pursue startup funding. In general, I found that grants tended to push me towards more innovative, kind of creative, experimental ideas and really focusing on doing something new and novel. Whereas the startup community was really pushing me to think deeply about user pain points, how to build something that people need and want, and not really caring if it's totally new and different, but to really focus on identifying gaps and to really focus on really narrowly focused specific products that fit that gap. And so this has also been kind of a point of contention with a lot of people is I kind of went that route. And was talking with investors and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up forming a public benefit company. So I sort of always tried to be sort of in between those two, where you sort of have a really strong social mission and you're organizing team and product around that social mission, which for me is Diamond Open Access Micropublication Journal, while keeping open any source of funding that could help you achieve that mission. And so that includes both grant type things as well as investments from the private sector. Anyway, so that's one another kind of part of my experience and background that might come into play. And just to say, I don't really know what the answer to all that is. I think it's important to keep all options on the table, especially since you have a lot of actors on both the nonprofit and the private space that are trying to influence these outcomes. So if we really strongly believe in open science and open access, I think we should have all options on the table to try to accomplish those goals, while keeping in mind all of the problems that come with different sources of funding. Okay, so yeah, so I'm kind of coming at this from the publishing side, and I guess to detail a bit more, like my frustrations and my, I said at the beginning I was hitting a wall. So my core assumption that I kind of have developed, and that has been, I'm trying to like understand if I can let go of this, or if I can kind of double down on it, is the idea of a separation between the library and publishers. So the assumption that I really want to test in these upcoming conversations is, can we, is this assumption that we should separate between the library and a publisher? And if I double down on that, and if other people double down on that, what that means is a publisher is responsible for the creation of content, from holding the hand of researchers from, holy shit, I just found something really cool in the lab, to creating content that effectively communicates that thing and assists them through quality control measures and steps, whether that's, open post-publication peer review, like on preprints, or some more private peer review quality control checks, but goes through whatever process needs to go through to create content, and then handing that content over to a library infrastructure, a library-like infrastructure, something that is fundamentally separate from the person that was helping to create that content. And the reason this is so important to me is that I feel like this is, among a few others, one of the most important and largest sources of problems in the publishing space and in the scholarly communication space. I think that there has been a failure of imagination and of commitment on the infrastructure side to create an infrastructure that can receive that content and to steward that content in digital spaces and digital infrastructures that is inspiring for researchers and wanting, there's obviously examples that go against this, but in general, I think there could be a lot more energy and intensity there. And on the publisher side, I think there's been a real active, effort to prevent that from happening. And that has also led to just a lot of really bad things happening. So in terms of publishers really being able to dictate what copyright looks like on this content, veering content towards closed infrastructure that they can then create additional paywalls for like Web of Science and things like that. So for me, where I'm kind of stuck is I want to go forward with that assumption, and I'm realizing that may not be possible or feasible, and most people might not even want that. And so that's really the assumption I want to be testing with this podcast. And so I'm going to try my best to not insert myself, and to not just be, like, why can't we have that? Which, I have been doing in the past, and I don't think has been very effective. So I'm going to try to really step back and listen carefully to what everybody else's idea for what is a library? What should a library be doing? Where are we all headed? What is our ideal goal, and how can we try to take steps towards that goal? And then, and I just feel like that'll be really helpful for me personally. So this is in some ways a very selfish podcast. I'm trying to pick a bunch of people's brains to understand deeply what are the fundamental contours of a scholarly communications infrastructure. What do we want that to look like in 50 or 100 years? So that we can just be a bit more aligned on that, and then start building things on top of that with those first principles in place. I've also one other kind of bias or thing that I might bring up from time to time is I've spent the last few years interacting with and really drawing inspiration from the Web3 public goods space. So these are people that are not, selling $1 million donkey NFTs on, on OpenSea, but are people that are thinking deeply about how to use Web3 protocols and infrastructures to build products and also build organizations and movements. And so that's something that is, has become quite controversial. But I think if you have the capacity to segment communities into different types of people and understand that there are always good and bad actors in every community, then I think some of those ideas, there's some really powerful ideas in there. And so I'll try to not insert myself, but it is something that I'm really excited about. And so, it might come up from time to time. And just one note on that, the reason why I'm so excited about it is that the Web3 community from the ground up has built in that distinction between kind of content creators or the content itself and the platforms that allow the creation of that content. So it basically empowers the content creators. In this case, it would be the authors of the scientific research, and really dramatically decreases the power of the organization that is facilitating that content creation. So there's deep infrastructure level design principles that make it hard for platforms to control and own content, and also make it difficult for organizations to control the infrastructure. It by definition, at a very deep kind of technical level, separates the organizations that are working on protocols and creating platforms from being able to always control that. So a lot of times these organizations will create a protocol, which is basically like creating software, and then they'll put it on chain, and then at that point everybody can use it and nobody can take it away. So even if the organization turns evil and wants to take that protocol away or pivot it to something that's doesn't benefit the community can still use that open source, publicly hosted protocol for eternity. So okay, I don't want to go too much on that rabbit hole, but that's just another one of my biases. So that's it. I don't necessarily have the best speaking voice, so I'll be working on that. We've already recorded the first episode, and I say a lot. I sound like a Valley girl, so just bear with me as I work on my speaking voice a bit. And and so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to push to get through 3 interviews, and then I'll kind of stop and see if anybody's kind of listening or interested, and then at that point, if there's interest in the conversations and there's interest in having us continue to go forward, I will figure out a way to host these podcasts on an actual podcast platform. I'm just putting them up right now on YouTube because it's free. But if people are excited about the conversations and want them to continue, then I will figure out a way to pay the whatever $10 a month to get the podcast up on an actual podcasting platform, so you can have them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Okay, I think that's about it. All right, bye everyone.